safely transition our athletes, I suppose, from being stuck in the box for 2 to 3 months and you know, in some cases being relatively inactive, and, you know, bringing them through into, you know, into training for their sport with an intensity and load. You know, that idea of moving an athlete from hibernation to high velocity, I guess, for coaches, that's what Cheryl and I want to try and do for you today. So I'll lead off. I'll just give you a little bit of background on periodization. I know we've got so many coaches here with so much spread in terms of experience. Some of the language that we use will be familiar, some of it may not, some of the concepts might be new, I don't know. I just assume that no one knows anything, and we just kind of start from the start, and that way you will kind of get the idea. So yeah, Cheryl, moving on, the next slide. Yeah, so I actually Googled this. I actually Googled what do bears do after hibernation, because I thought we're all a bunch of bears, and all your athletes are a bunch of bears, really. We've all been in hibernation for a couple of months. And it turns out that bears actually go through several phases before they get up to 100%. So when they come out of their hidey hole, they don't come out running. They come out rather slow and gently, and they actually have a first phase called walking hibernation. And during this phase, they actually sleep a lot. And you'll get a feel for the correlations here with our athletes. We want our athletes to be sleeping a lot too, right? They prioritize a high protein diet initially, and we certainly want our athletes to do the same. And then when the snow melts and the vegetation starts coming through, they start adopting quite a high plant-based diet as well, as you can see with this cute little bear here with a plant hanging out its mouth. Wonderful photo. And again, we want our athletes to be adopting, you know, a food first, whole food, relatively plant-based diet. When we talk about plant-based, we just mean there's a lot of plants in the diet. It doesn't mean become a vegetarian. It doesn't mean stop eating meat. It just means include a lot of fruits and a lot of vegetables. And, you know, every high-performing diet, every high-performing athlete should be doing that. All right, Cheryl, thank you. Okay, interesting slide for you as coaches. Managing the return to sport after quarantine, after circuit breaker, lockdown, whatever the language is. You can see on the left the ideal model. Okay, so, you know, we start our athletes building with, you know, a bunch of general training, strength, conditioning, speed, power work. We sprinkle in droplets of high intensity effort just to get them accumulating exposures to that and getting them to adapt to that. And the specific training, you know, the skill, the tactical, the practice, the sport-specific movements, that might be, you know, if it's a team-based sport, it might be up and down, it might be lateral, side to side, it might be forward and backwards. When we're trying to get athletes fit, we just get them moving in one direction generally, right? So that's the ideal model. What will likely happen? Well, I guess that's over to you in large degrees, but you can see the difference in the graphs and the prediction that, you know, athletes will start off the whole wrong way around. They'll totally skip that general training phase and they'll be straight into specific training. You know, it was interesting. I was talking with professional rugby circles back in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. So 4 weeks ago in New Zealand, they were given the green light to start Super Rugby competition. And so they had 4 weeks to get the athletes ready. And the natural reaction for the coaches was to fly into it. They wanted to start double day trainings, you know, high intensity contact work, you know, multilateral movements. And the strength and conditioning coaches were like, whoa, hang on a minute. We got to start from the start. You know, we can't do that. We've got to build slowly and logically, allow these adaptations to occur. Otherwise, we're going to blow Achilles heels. We're going to blow ACLs, etc. So just a nice little reflection on the real world, and, you know, conscious the coaches have been pent up and are chomping at the bit to get hold of their athletes as well. So I guess that's my first message is, you know, just take a big deep breath. And just, you know, just slow it all down a little bit and think about this strategically, how we're actually going to reintroduce our athletes back into training. Cheryl, thank you. And there's another little bit at the bottom, Cheryl, I think, if you click. Yeah. Okay, so this is your traditional periodization model. A lot of you will have seen this or things much similar to it. So you can see we start with our pre-season or our base phase, where the intensity is a little lower. It's traditionally tackled with high volume. If you're, a swim coach, bike, run, maybe a running-based team sport coach, you'll relate to this model. From base, into build, the intensity starts coming up, the volume starts dropping a little bit into our race prep, where we really peak the intensity, expose the athlete to, race conditions, I suppose, race pace conditions. And then, of course, we freshen up the athlete going into the competition, and then we go through a recovery phase. Of course, glaringly obvious on this periodization plan is the lack of a COVID-19 circuit breaker. That is not in the model, is it? So this is the question we have, and this is the problem that we're working through. And so, what we can do as sport nutritionists, as sport dietitians, and indeed as a coach, trying to think about how to integrate nutrition into your coaching, is to try and match the dietary intake of the athlete with their training requirements. And that's why I really tell the story about the beer when you think about what our athletes are going to have to do when they come out in terms of building, lean muscle mass, building strength, building power. Dietary protein is very important. Dietary fat is actually really important. And so really what we start doing is thinking about matching or periodizing the carbohydrate intake with the athlete's load. Cheryl, next slide. So it's all a big jigsaw puzzle, isn't it, really? We have this training piece of the puzzle. What are the goals of training? What are you trying to do with the athlete, sport specific? And then how to integrate nutrition into that training puzzle piece to optimize training adaptations. And so therefore, for yourselves as coaches, the planning, how can training and nutrition really interact, both short term, perhaps over the next month, and then longer term through the year, and then building some of these nutrition principles into your macro and micro cycles of your training plan. Cheryl, next slide. Okay, Cheryl, you can just tap the button a few times. There's a bunch of variables here. That's great, thanks. So, training variable, if we just go back one there, training variables versus nutrition variables. So, on the coach side of things, really you're getting an athlete to expend energy, aren't you, in terms of the amount of training that you're programming, the load and the intensity, what type of exercise is it? Is it aerobic? Is it anaerobic? Is resistance training? And the timing as well in terms of periodization. Interestingly, if I just use swimming as an example, for Tokyo 2021, the finals will actually be swum in the morning. That has a huge impact both on the coach and the athlete thinking that through, because the human body doesn't tend to like to swim fast. It doesn't like to run fast, doesn't like to do anything fast generally in the morning. It all happens in the evening when our body temperature and our circadian rhythm peaks. So we really need to think that through. And then, of course, on the sport dietitian side, we have, the energy intake side of things. So, how much food are we programming in terms of calories, kilojoules, if you're thinking that, the carbohydrates being the fuel. I want you to think about your athletes a little bit like a high performance vehicle. Think of them as a Porsche or a Ferrari. We're going to use that analogy a little bit later on. The type of food that we're putting into the tank, carbohydrates versus protein versus fat, and the timing or the eating frequency. Do we just give them 3 square meals a day? Do we increase that to 5 or 6, etc.? Okay, and then we think about what we're trying to do with the athlete. So are we trying to change their body composition? Have our athletes fattened up a little bit? Some will definitely have gotten out of shape, no doubt about it, and you know, even looking at our swimmers now, some are actually still in very, very good condition. Some have actually fattened up a little bit. I actually don't mind that because, you know, everything in nature and biology, it has to reset at some point in time, and a little reset around the waistline doesn't hurt athletes from time to time, and getting a little bit more sleep and a little bit more rest. Plenty of time to lose that extra adiposity, I think. You know, we're all trying to optimize our training recovery and our adaptive response to training, aren't we? It's only actually when we eat and when we sleep that we adapt to the training stimulus that you as a coach is providing. The athletes don't actually, you know, kind of almost get better while they're running. Certainly, you know, there are things like gait and, you know, technique. Think about heavy technique sports like swimming, like kayak, canoe kayak. Yes, practice the technique, but all of the adaptations actually come from eating and from sleeping, right? So we're trying to create this optimal performance model by interconnecting nutrition with coaching. Thanks, Cheryl. Next one. That's the story, and there should be one more. All right. So you can take a screenshot of this if you like. I mean, it's 101, it's straight out of the literature in terms of, you know, what we prescribe around carbohydrates, protein, and sometimes fat, but usually carbohydrates and protein during each phase. Okay, so you can see during the general prep phase, we're exposing the athlete to a lot of volume. They're just doing more. If you think about them as that car that I just suggested, you know, they're doing more laps of the track, right? So therefore they need more fuel. Okay, so therefore during that base phase, when training volume is higher, we put more carbohydrate into them. You'll see across the way that protein actually stays incredibly stable. We very rarely play around with protein intake. We try and keep that steady across all of the phases, unless an athlete is actually trying to drop body fat but maintain muscle mass, then we might really hike the protein up somewhat. Indeed, in collision-based sports, we would probably hike the protein up a little bit more as well. 1.5 to 1.7 grams per kg protein. I'm not very good at math, to be fair. And just, you know, practically speaking, we tend to just round that up to around about 2 grams per kg. So, you know, for example, I'm 100 kilograms. So I would need approximately 200 grams of protein a day to facilitate my muscle protein synthesis and my muscular repair. And you can see that the carbohydrates change a little bit too. So during that build phase where the volume comes down a little bit, we can drop the carbohydrate a little bit. We're not going low carbohydrate at any point other than maybe during that transition phase, you know, the season's finished up. You know, maybe we're in off season, getting ready for pre-season, and, you know, maybe we need to manipulate the body composition a little bit. And I'll share with you a case study of mine with cycling where we did just that. So cycling, you know, heavy endurance-based sport. I mean, there's a lot of different disciplines within cycling, but if we just think about road cycling, and Team Sky actually did a lot of work and really innovated this space around fueling for the work required. So again, thinking about the cyclist, the athlete as a car, as a vehicle, high performance vehicle, you know, how much work are they doing and how much fuel do they need? So they just run off a traffic light system, and it's really easy for you to relate to. So the green one there, so this is during training. Okay, my cyclist is going to be out on the road during training. Well, it's a really easy day, easy legs, 1 ride in a day. They usually do 2 or more. So, okay, maybe they don't need so much fuel compared to perhaps a moderate day. Maybe it's a long ride with tempo efforts. Okay, we probably need to fuel them because they're doing more laps of the track, but we don't need to really pump it in high pressure. We can just kind of trickle it in, maybe 30 to 45 grams an hour. 30 grams is around about a banana, if you think about it like that. A lot of our cyclists use energy gels, and a lot of athletes do, you know, gummies. Even honey is fantastic. Write that down in your notebook. Honey is a beautiful energy gel. It works just as well as everything else. Actually, bananas work just as well as everything else too, if the athlete can tolerate that. And then you can see at the bottom the red line stuff. This is race pace intensity. This is going hard, right? So this is full throttle. The pedal is on the floor. We're burning the most fuel that we can possibly burn, and that's predominantly all carbohydrates. So again, if the athlete can tolerate it, we push a little more carbohydrate in, up to 60 grams per hour or not. GLU means glucose and FRU means fructose. Research has shown that if we mix up the sugars, we can actually get even more carbohydrate into the athlete, and it seems to be tolerated quite well. We have different carbohydrate absorption channels in the gut. We have a whole bunch of them for glucose, and we have a separate bunch of them for fructose, so we can employ both and actually get the athlete to absorb more carbohydrate. And then we can also play around with the concept of drip feeding some protein into the athlete too, if we want to preserve muscle mass, if we want to perhaps explore the adaptation of lean muscle tissue to prolonged endurance-based exercise. Makes good sense, I think, if the athlete can tolerate it, to pop a little bit of protein into the mix as well. Thanks, Cheryl. Yes, drink regularly. That's nice. Okay, so these arrows are going to go all over the show here. We might as well put them all up all at once. Great job, Cheryl. Thank you. This is actually all the food that a Tour de France cyclist would consume in one day. This was one of the Schleck brothers, actually. If you're a cycling coach into cycling, you'll know that name. So you know, if you trace the arrows, you can see that there's a whole bunch of fueling going on before training. So a big bowl of oat porridge. We've got pasta and rice, typically eaten by endurance athletes as well. We've got high protein recovery foods and meats, yogurts and milks. Also in a big slab of tuna over there. And then we've got that concept of fueling for the work done at the bottom. So a whole lot of energy gels. There's around about 20 to 25 grams of carbohydrate in one of those. Energy gels confuse people a lot, but they just think of them as like liquid gummy bears, really. It's just liquid sugar. And again, you can achieve the same thing with honey, no problem whatsoever. So quite amazing, really, when you look at it like that. And you can see all the colors, all the fruits, all the vegetables, the colors of the rainbow there. It's, apart from the energy gels, it's actually a whole food based diet. Performance to these guys is just so important, and not only fueling but recovery. So really nice. A picture says 1,000 words, doesn't it? Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, so this is Calvin. Calvin Lim won gold in the track 2000 and when did he do that? 2016, I think. Sea Games, yeah. So let's wind it on, Cheryl. I've just got a quick case study here just to show you. Yeah, great. So in terms of fueling before a training session, as you've heard, we can manipulate the amount of carbohydrate that we provide. Again, in blue, you've got 101 advice there. If you screenshot that, you know, your pre-training meal, maybe 3 to 4 hours before you go, or, you know, maybe you're snacking on something smaller 1 to 2 hours before training, predominantly carbohydrate based. Keep the fat down to complement how it all sits in the tummy. Keep the fiber down for the same reason, right? Stick to foods that the athlete's familiar with. Push your hydration. The thing is, though, with Calvin, when I met him, he was fueling like this for every single session. So when I showed you the traffic light model, he wasn't really doing that at all. Every day was high carb day for Calvin. even he was fueling the easy legs, the easy rides, like he would, you know, a race pace session. And so, of course, you know, when you consume more than you burn, what happens is that, you know, you put it on around your middle a little bit, your skin folds go up, you get a little bit fatter. And when strength to power ratio is just so important, weight to power ratio is just so important for cyclists. You know, particularly on the track, it was slowing them down a little bit. So we had a little play with that. Cheryl, yeah, thank you. So, you know, we're in that transition phase. You know, we were off season, getting ready for pre-season, getting ready, you know, training to be able to train, I suppose. And so introduced this concept to Calvin of periodizing his carbohydrates or his fuel for the prescribed session. So you can see there a light session. Actually, I just got him to train without any carbohydrate, just have a source of protein, maybe a couple of eggs. I like my athletes to train in a protein-fed state for sure, you know, just for that muscle, to preserve that muscle. Or maybe if it was a high-intensity session, he might have a banana prior to training. If he had a light session, so maybe he had a really big session at night and then a light one tomorrow morning, he didn't need to really aggressively kind of refuel for that. So we would prioritize the protein and the fruits and the vegetables after training, but kind of leave all the rice and stuff alone. And obviously, you know, really pushed his hydration and his electrolytes, because, you know, he sweats a lot. And when training indoors, there's just not that breeze and that evaporative sweat loss. So, you know, get very hot. All right. Wind it on, Cheryl. Thank you. Yeah. So I don't show you here, but Calvin lost about 47 mils of body fat, actually, with that approach. And he went into the preseason training and a bunch of altitude training in Colorado, you know, much lighter in the saddle. I think he lost about 4 kilograms. And he had a great season as well. So, and I guess what he was doing was teaching his body to work with a little bit of, without carbohydrate, I guess, just to enable those adaptations. So just a real life example of manipulating carbohydrate and matching it to the work done. I wouldn't expect you to be able to do that independently, and I wouldn't ask you to do that with an athlete, but it gives you a tool in the toolbox. And reach out to your sport dietitian and say, hey, you know, what about this concept of periodizing carbohydrate? I'm doing X, Y, and Z with the athlete. You know, how should I be feeding them at the moment? I'm really just trying to get you to think about these fundamental questions. And then you can actually carry a, you know, really, really nice conversation with the sport dietitian. Just another great tool. I mean, this is real 101 stuff. I'm sure you've all seen this, you know, this performance plate concept. For athletes, I find I generally try and keep things really simple, really practical, just give them a basic tool that they can use 3 times a day. And so, you know, this performance plate concept of really just dividing your dinner plate into thirds. That's all we've done there. We've kind of, you tilt your head a little bit to the right, you've got a radiation sign. If you spin it the other way, we've got a peace sign, haven't we? So if you can visualize that on the plate. And then, of course, we've got our grains or our carbohydrates at the top, our protein and our vegetables. So we think of grains, and we think of, you know, rice and noodles and pasta and potatoes and breads and cereals and whole grains and legumes. We think of those as go foods. Again, the car, fuel for go, go, go. Okay, green for go. And then, of course, protein for our grow foods. So that's, you know, our meat, our chicken, our fish, our vegetable source protein as well, be it, you know, soy or tofu, tempeh, legumes, nuts, that sort of thing. And then our glow foods, which is our fruits and our vegetables, our micronutrients, our vitamins and our minerals, our phytonutrients, our antioxidants. So important for the immune system, so important for recovery. It's the glue that really sticks everything together. Unfortunately, it's the part of the plate that goes missing, particularly with boys, particularly with young men, and actually, you know, for most athletes, to be fair. Yeah. Thanks, Cheryl. Next one there. Okay. Yep. Great. Oh. And we just wind it back. There we go. I just wanted to just dive on this a little bit more, because obviously, you know, COVID-19, immune function, immune health, you know, it's being talked about a lot. and really can't overemphasize this part of the plate in terms of a food first approach. A really easy little challenge for your athletes is just to try and consume the colors of the rainbow every day. And that's a really nice visual, isn't it? You can see, what foods are what colors, and each color represents a different density of particular vitamins and minerals and nutrients. Okay, so you can see in our reds, for example, lycopene and anthocyanins, powerful antioxidants. We get a lot of those out of reds and purples as well. From my experience, red and purple foods and blue foods are often missing in an athlete's diet, but that's where a large part of the anti-inflammation comes from anthocyanins and antioxidant-rich foods. And then, our orange carotenoids, vitamin C, we all know about that for immunity as well. And then our greens as well, lutein, indoles for antioxidants. So, we just want to keep the athlete really well. We want to keep them healthy, and we want to keep them injury-free. And if they're in both of those places, they're much more ready to tackle the training program that you're going to present to them. Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, just a little show. Okay. So this is just a micronutritional periodization plan. A weekly plan, a daily plan actually, for a young swimmer, as an example, somebody who is training twice a day perhaps. Actually, our swimmers came back and just did 1 a days for the first, what are we in now, week 2 I think. Yeah, so they're still on 1 a days actually, and then I'll start lifting. So if we go forward, Cheryl, thank you. Yeah, so this is how I might present a food plan to a young swimmer. And it just shows them, in a real easy visual, 1-page style, what to eat when. You can see there that the first timeline starts at 7 p.m. when typically evening training would finish. Obviously, this is not happening right now, but it will probably start happening, next week or the week after as we move into phase 2. And we can see here, just to talk you through quickly, this is really emphasizing fueling and recovery, which I want you to think about. So, with some quick carbs, some rehydration, some protein, some chocolate milk. Again, if you really need a nice tip for your athletes, just tell them to start drinking chocolate milk after training. Over 20 university studies demonstrating that it is just so very, very effective. And also a glycogen reload and performance study out of the US with swimmers, showing that it actually helped swimmers take almost 2 seconds off their time trial, off their middle distance time trial. So it's just about jamming carbohydrate fuel back into the muscle and then getting the muscle to repair. There's our plate model, and slightly different representation. Third, protein, carbs, and our vegetable, salad, fruit, VSF, right? Getting the athlete to actually wind down a little bit, to relax, to engage their parasympathetic nervous system. Dim lights in the house, screens on night mode. You'll be surprised how many people don't know that their phone or their iPad or their computer has a night mode on it. Get them to use that, block out that blue light, get them making melatonin. Reading, music, just chilling out a little bit. Athletes get stuck in the red. They're all day and all night in the sympathetic zone, aren't they? Just go, 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 go. It's probably somewhat symptomatic of living in Singapore as well, and just the speed at which things move here. But of course, when athletes get stuck in the red, and when the pedal is stuck on the floor, they burn out, don't they? And as a coach, you don't want that for your athlete. So, what other performance tools can they access? Are they foam rolling? Should they be getting into some cold water? Probably not too much, actually. Tart cherry, pomegranate juice, beetroot juice, watermelon juice. All of these foods we know reduce inflammation, help the athlete feel better and sleep better as well. What else can they do? Are they a young athlete? Are they trying to put on weight? Are they trying to, enable strength gains in the gym? Are they just a teenager that's growing at a great rate of knots? Are they always hungry? Do they need some sort of milk protein before bed? Homemade smoothie, Greek yogurt, milk, berries, squeeze of honey, half a frozen banana. That will get them through the night. And quite a few studies now emerging suggesting that last protein-rich feeding before sleep is really, really important for recovery, for lean muscle mass synthesis, and for strength gains as well, functional gains. Sleep, actually, I mean, we're talking about food today. In my opinion, sleep is actually more important than food. If you quit eating and you quit sleeping at the same time, you'll die of sleep deprivation first. The body needs sleep much more than food. And of course, it's actually during sleep that we do most of our growth and most of our repair. It's only in sleep that we build bone mass, that our bones grow. And actually, most of our immune strength comes from sleep as well. Our killer T cells, they become like James Bond. They become like assassins, and they prowl around the body looking for the bad guys at night while you sleep and while your athletes sleep. Okay. And of course, you know, our sport psychology team take our athletes through relaxation as well, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, different mental skills that the athlete can employ to help them relax and actually get that sleep that they so badly need. And then on the bottom, you can see we have quite an early start, typical of swimming, typical perhaps of rowing as well, and a lot of other sports where the athlete has to get up quite early. You can see that we're training in a protein-fed state. Athletes, if they can't eat early, they can usually drink early. So, you know, some sort of liquid breakfast there, a smoothie or something works really well. Then training, and then we have another really good carbohydrate, protein-containing breakfast. Drinking all day, eating really well with our performance plate, perhaps a little nap in the afternoon, fueling well before training and after training. Again, a really good recovery meal at the end of the day, anchor the end of the day with a really good meal. And if it's not too late, if the evening meal is not too late, then they'll have room for another little supper, pre-bed protein meal before bed, before tucking into bed. 8 to 10 hours of sleep in a day, including a nap. All the research would suggest that that's where athletes need to be. The average here is likely much less than that, although the good news is athletes have been sleeping a whole lot more during circuit breaker, probably the highest sleep numbers I've seen actually, which is really nice. So really reset the button there. That's fantastic. Thanks, Cheryl. There's one more slide, I think. So this one's going to be really important for you as a coach, getting the recovery right, and your athletes don't just thrash them and then send them on their way without a little word from yourself on recovery. It's really important to think that, you know, as coaches, you'll be the first port of call. Actually, the athlete will talk to you before he talks to me or Cheryl about repair, about refuel, about rehydration, about recovery, about supplementation even. Research would suggest that the coach is the first line of inquiry around all of those topics, right? So just think about the 4 R's. Think about the car that's been around the track. What's happened to the car? Okay, well, its radiator is probably empty, so it needs rehydrating, and it's really hot, so it needs cooling down. The gas tank is empty, so it needs refueling. The tires are ripped to shreds, aren't they? So they need repairing. And then the car probably needs to sit in the garage for a little bit and just chill out. So I talked about chocolate milk. It actually sorts out rehydration, refuel, and repair for the first 1 to 2 hours. Usually the athlete is not feeling very hungry straight after training. Get them to drink chocolate milk or a lactose-free milk, freely available in the supermarkets here in Singapore. Soy milk, no problem. Chocolate soy milk, no problem. Okay. And then, you know, when the appetite comes back, when the blood leaves the muscles and starts pushing back into the stomach, the appetite comes back, and they can start, you know, looking at a little mixed meal, carbohydrate, protein, fruit and yogurt, a smoothie, sushi, chicken rice, something like this. And then the relaxation component is really quite important when we think about recovery. It includes social interaction, socializing with friends. It includes napping in the day. It includes a really good overnight sleep. So those four R's are going to really see you right, I think, over the next phase as you talk to your athletes. Just if you concentrate on nothing else, just think about recovery and getting those 4 R's of recovery in place with your athlete, getting them to drink after training, refuel and repair with carbohydrate and protein, and get them to chill out a little bit. And at the end of the day, they will adapt to your training load and training intensity much more quickly if they do these simple things. They do them consistently and they do them well. And actually, I hope you've got the impression that it's quite easy to achieve if you think about, some basic foods, milk, chocolate milk. It covers a lot of it off. You've got the performance plate model there. You've got a food first approach. You've got the colors of the rainbow. And then you've got some slightly more involved strategy like periodizing the carbohydrate, and ultimately thinking about your athletes for the next little while as little bears coming out of the hibernation hole, and just getting them back up to speed slowly and gently and methodically, and matching or encouraging them to match their nutrient intake with those demands, carbohydrate and protein in particular. And on the back of that, sleeping a whole bunch. That's all I'm going to talk to you about today, and certainly around sleep as well. I think you'll all probably be quite interested in that topic, and I think Yongju, that might be one for the next chat. I just wanted to drop that in there. I know I talked about sleep last year with the coaches, and I think that would be a good one to follow up with after we've talked about food. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we can arrange one. Yep.
So that's all from me. I'd like to hand over to Cheryl now, who's going to take you from this food first approach into the sharper end of the wedge, as it were, with respect to supplementation and some case studies out of one of Cheryl's sports, which is canoe kayak. So Cheryl, the driving wheel is yours, and thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Rico. Okay, hi everybody. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, can hear good.
Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, awesome. Now it's really wonderful to have this opportunity to speak to you guys and share a little bit more about supplements, because often we hear questions about, from athletes. Oh, what supplement can I take to go faster? What supplement can I take to improve my recovery? But often they don't ask about, what can I do to improve my sleep so I can recover faster? Or what foods can I eat? So this is a really common topic that has a lot of misconception in it. Unfortunately, in the sports nutrition industry, it's very profit driven. And sometimes athletes get approached by sponsors and they are made to think that, they need this supplement without even consideration to what sort of periodized training program they are doing, without consideration to nutrition periodization, for example. Also, in the couple of examples here, you've got top athletes from the Italian Olympic team being sponsored by Herbalife, which is technically an MLM company. So see, again, it's very profit driven. Unfortunately, these companies don't think about the welfare of the athletes from the point of whether they are using evidence-based supplements. The entry into this sports supplement market is also very low. It's very easy for athletes or anyone to purchase stuff online. So this is just from RedMart. You can purchase any supplement you want, regardless of whether it's tested to be free or WADA banned substances, or you can just purchase something without regard to whether it's even evidence-based. So what I'll be sharing with you today is how we approach sports supplements in an athlete's diet, there is a space and time for it, but we would use a more systematic approach that also looks into the health and wellness of the athlete as well. Okay, so just moving on, I'd like to share with you this concept of the cupcake approach. So I like to liken the base of the cupcake, it being the base. You can't have any other toppings on it without, a good structure. And this base is what we liken to be healthy eating. A lot of it, is contributed by good dietary habits, your good recovery practices, and I'll share with you later why it's so important. Okay, the next layer will be the icing, which is what we refer to sports foods as. So this will be stuff like energy bars, sports drinks, gels, your whey protein powders, etc. And lastly, the cherry on the icing would be your ergogenic aids, or rather your performance aids, like caffeine, creatine, beta-alanine, etc. Okay, so that only gives you a small boost. You can't have the cherry on the cake without having a good base. But again, the cherry can make the entire cake pop. So it's just having this kind of systematic approach towards supplements that is going to be very beneficial to the athlete. And it's really wonderful that I'm able to share with you guys today, because as coaches, you are the gatekeepers of this information to the athlete. You are the first people that they will approach for advice. Of course, at the end of today, I don't expect you to be able to advise athletes on, how to use caffeine, how to use creatine, but I'll be sharing with you some resources as to where you can find evidence-based information that is reliable for you to share. And of course, we've got dietitians from SSI and NYSI on hand to help you answer your queries as well. Okay, so a lot of the sports nutrition supplement industry is based on marketing, very strong marketing strategies. And we find that there is a big gap in terms of us doing so, marketing real food. And if you look at it, real food actually provides you all the substrates that the supplement industry uses to create their supplements. Okay, so on the left, this is what we have created from SSI. It's what we term as the Fine Food series. So you might notice this around sports centers when we enter phase 2 of the circuit breaker. That we've posted some of it around. It's marketing real food for its performance enhancing benefits. Okay, the infographic on the right is the food equivalents of your sports supplements that your athletes can have in place of synthetic stuff from the bottle. Okay. Lots cheaper and definitely more wholesome. Okay, now why I would strongly encourage going food first. This is just one example. Vitamin C. Okay, so we can get vitamin C obviously from a supplement, from a bottle. We can also get vitamin C from your glow foods, like your fruits and vegetables. So in this example is the orange. And you can see there, one orange has got about 63 mg of vitamin C. But along with that, you've got so many other nutrients in that too. Of course, carbohydrates to fuel up as part of your goal foods. But on top of that, you got your folate, to help your red blood cells and healthy red blood cells form. You've got your vitamin, there are different types of vitamin Bs as well. So the benefit of food is that it gives you a lot more nutrients and also antioxidants that you cannot take from a supplement. Okay. On the other hand, vitamin C supplements, say something that's common in the market, the lowest dose probably is 200 mg per pill. Now, there are some studies that have shown taking high doses of antioxidants such as vitamin C or vitamin E has detrimental effects on training adaptations. So sometimes going higher dose of taking a particular nutrient is not going to be helpful. In fact, it can be very detrimental. Okay. Another example of what I want to show is how different foods contain a whole wide range of nutrients. Okay, this is an infographic created by a dietitian. And I love it because it's very visual, it's simple as well, very eye-catching too. So just to pick out an example, eggs. So eggs, they contain vitamin A, vitamin Bs, vitamin D as well. So, one food item has such a whole wide range of different nutrients that is not available if you were to just consume a supplement. Okay. So a similar way of putting it across as compared to the cupcake concept that I introduced earlier. So the base of this pyramid is how we use food first to help the body grow and mature, so that you've got a good bone structure, you've got good body composition to help you help the athletes train the best that they can be in their sport, just to optimize their performance. Okay. After that, after we have sorted out a good food first approach, that's when a little bit of more of the high-end stuff that can come in. For example, periodized nutrition, that what Rico has shared with everybody earlier on. And lastly, it's that icing on that cake, which is the performance supplements. I really love it that there are some of these infographics available. So this is from YLM Sports Science. If you are interested, you can hop on to he's on Facebook, Instagram, or online. He's got a website. So what he does is to translate journal articles into very easy to read infographics that you can use as well in your practice. So this simply speaks about the uses of the banana for the athlete, how it can fuel them up. Honestly speaking, bananas are Mother Nature's form of energy bars, and yeah, so many good things about that. Whole wide range of nutrients in there too. All right, there is a time and there is a space for the use of performance supplements. Now, this infographic again is from YLM Sports Science, but the original article was from this journal article, top physiologists, sports physiologists, and sports nutritionists. So what they have summarized here is how different types of supplements can help the different types of events in athletics. Okay, so there is a time and there is a appropriate space to use this kind of supplements, and it's not necessary that the more supplements that you use, the better it is. Okay. I won't dive too much into detail about what each supplement can and cannot do, because I will refer you on to another supplement policy that we recently created. Okay, this is another infographic to show that actually sometimes we do need to rely on supplements simply because we can't achieve the therapeutic dose from real foods. For example, creatine. Honestly speaking, we do need to rely on some supplements for creatine. If we want to achieve a therapeutic dose of about 5 grams, we need the athlete to consume at least 1 kilo of meat, which honestly speaking, it's not doable. Okay, so sometimes there is a space where supplements can be brought into the picture. Okay. But of course, that's also underpinned by a food first approach. All right, so this is something very exciting, something that we've been working on for a very, very long time. So together with NYSI, SSI, and ADS have created a joint policy on supplement intake. So this policy is meant to guide users, both athletes and coaches, parents, NSAs, as to how to use supplements, when is the right time to use supplements. And I'm just going to use this infographic very quickly just to show you a flow chart of this decision-making tree. So the first thing that needs to come into consideration is whether the athlete is of an appropriate age for them to be even using supplements in the first place. Generally, we wouldn't recommend the use of performance subs for those 18 and under, simply because they can benefit so much from natural foods, from whole foods, and from refining their basic eating habits and sleeping habits before even performance supplements can take precedence in their training program. Okay. Next up, we need to, of course, take into consideration the athlete's goals and the nature of the training program, because as what Rico shared earlier, we need to appropriately periodize. Same thing for periodized nutrition, periodized training. We need to periodize the use of supplements as well, just to maximize its benefit. The more may not be the merrier in this case. Next, importantly, is the level of evidence of the supplements. Again, this supplement industry is a very low entry barrier. Any supplement manufacturer can just come in, do good marketing on their supplement, and people would just buy it off the shelf without needing to show that there is good scientific evidence backing it. Okay, so it's very important before an athlete or coach is considering using the supplement is to check that it's well evidence-based. Next, the doping risk. Okay, carded athletes are subject to doping tests by WADA, just to check that they are not taking any WADA prohibited banned substances. There are some cases where cross-contamination can happen. So meaning if somebody were to be using a shaker bottle that contain, banned substance, and your athlete were to be just using that shaker bottle to mix up their supplement, they can also be liable to regulations by WADA just for consuming a prohibited substance. On the same note, some manufacturers, they may require third-party manufacturers to help them manufacture their products. So meaning if company A has banned substances in their product, and then the same company, the same third-party manufacturer is going to manufacture supplements for company B, and the athlete consumes products from company B and would have traces of products from company A, they will also be liable to WADA rules and regulations as well. So hence, it's very, very important to ensure that the supplements that athletes are using have been tested by an established quality assurance program. This again does not cut the risk to zero, it just lowers the risk of being flagged out as breaking the rules for WADA. Lastly, is to consider whether the supplement has been trialed in practice before it is used for competition. Same thing, you wouldn't want to use a new pair of shoes or a new race strategy during the day of competition. So it's the same concept. If you were to use a supplement, you want to trial it so that you are familiar with how it is in your body. And of course, some supplements have the benefit of improving the quality of training such that it becomes a supplement that ergogenic aid for training rather than simply just a supplement for competition. Okay, so hence it goes back to the concept of using the appropriate supplements in a periodized manner. Okay, now I would like to share with you a case study from Canoe Kayak. So this group of athletes, have been working with them since I joined in 2012, and it's been amazing. They are very well trained. They have been sometimes training up to 25 hours per week. So it's a very highly demanding training program. I will not touch too much on the nutrition aspects because Rico has already covered most of that in the earlier part of the talk. I will just focus on how I've been using ergogenic aids for training and for competition. Okay, so the first part of the season for them is mainly to build up their endurance base and to increase strength and hypertrophy. Now, in that case, the performance supplement, for them that's quite appropriate would be the use of creatine, just to help them with that strength and hypertrophy. And of course, in terms of building endurance, is what Rico said, sometimes you need to train low, periodize your nutrition accordingly to build that endurance base appropriately. Okay, so for this phase, creatine is the supplement. For the early season, that's when they dive a little bit more into sprint work, and also they also have an increase in their strength and hypertrophy program. Now, for the sprint work, just to complement it, that's where creatine can also play a part. But that's also when we start to introduce beta-alanine and bicarb. So these are blood buffers to help them recover a bit faster from that sprint work. I've also started to introduce a little bit of caffeine during this phase, just to prep them for the main season where there is a lot of racing work to do. And caffeine, being a very good cognitive enhancer, can help in that space. So we use that to help them get used to what the racing demands will be. Okay. And then moving on to the main season, that's where we would keep all the supplements in place. So creatine, beta-alanine, bicarb, and caffeine as well, because that's when they are doing a lot of racing. It's very demanding in terms of sprint work as well. And just to drop in a little creatine just to maintain and maximize their strength as well. Okay. All right. Can everyone hear me there? Okay, cool. So just like to quickly summarize the performance rocks. I would like to correct my sequence actually. I put training as number 1, sleep as number 2, nutrition and hydration as number 3. Okay, and nutrition and hydration is complemented by a food first approach with supplement use, appropriate supplement use. Okay, and just to finally summarize this whole session. So what Rico and I have shared with you is about the huge rocks of performance. So things like nutrition periodization, of course, training periodization as well, sleep, these are the rocks that your athletes need to focus on. Without those rocks, the pebbles, the small pebbles, such as the use of supplements, those will not be as useful as they can be. Okay. The next thing that I have just shared is the use of the food versus supplements. The cupcake theory, that there is a time and place for the little sprinkles of your performance or your ergogenic aids. But what you really want the cake to pop is when you've got a good base of good nutrition and sleep performance habits. Okay. Next up is the use of evidence-based, training program, nutrition program, of course, supplement program as well. Okay. And as coaches, I think you all would agree with me that consistency is key, and that now that athletes are coming out of hibernation, the objective is it's not for them to go dive deep into, hitting high numbers or hitting a high volume of weights in the gym. It's mainly by getting them slowly acclimatized and getting used to the program as well. So just aiming to be a little bit better rather than being perfect is also very important at this stage. All right, so I think that's all we have today.
Thanks,
I'll hand the
Cheryl.
time back to Yongju.
Thank you for the presentation. Let me share my screen first.